Hello. So a few days ago somebody asked me if I might record a video in Explain 11 showing the Cessna 172 and going through the whole flight planning process in LittleNavMap and then flying the route just to show what you're thinking about along the way and what you might be doing. So let's go across to LittleNavMap. You can see on the map my aircraft is at Wickham Air Park. If I change over to OpenStreetMap, so the only window I have open at the moment in LittleNavMap, or the only view I have, is of the map. I've switched everything else off, and that's purely so we can get an idea of what I'm going to configure, how I'm going to do it. So we are working. If we go and have a look, can we see about LittleNavMap? I'm running version 2.6.2. Beta. So this is the latest beta of LittleNavMap. So it may look slightly different to yours, and I'll explain where I've noticed differences along the way. We need to make sure, first of all, in the scenery library menu, that we have selected X-plane as our scenery. If we have multiple simulators, we may have loaded the database of scenery from each simulator. So you need to make sure it matches the aircraft simulator you're running. You also need to sort out the flight simulator connection. So before I started the video, I had come in here, I'd gone to the X-plane tab and click connect, which resulted in my airplane appearing. If I had any AI aircraft configured within X-plane, they would have lit up on here as well as orange instead of yellow. So what are we going to need to create a flight plan? First of all, we're going to go to the window menu and we're going to switch on the flight planning window. Now, it's appeared at the bottom. We don't want it there, or I don't want it there. I'd rather, and I can drag the top of it, and I can drag it around. If I keep holding the left mouse button down as I move it, I can choose where I want to dock it around the screen, so I prefer to have it on the left-hand side. We can also go to the window menu and say we would like to have the information panel available. And again, it's put it down here, and we really don't want it there, so we can drag over, and if we drag towards the bottom of the left hand side, if we go on to the left, it's going to try and put it on top of flight planning. We don't really want that. We want it to go underneath flight planning. So once I get down into the corner, it illustrates doing that, and I can let go and it fits in. Notice whenever anything is docked, you also get the mouse pointer will change when you get over the gap in between the panels, so you can rearrange them as you want to. What else might we want? So if I was going to put the elevation profile in of our flight plan, it makes no sense to do it at the moment, but if we just drag it around, again by grabbing the top of it, once we get over the map, if we go down towards the middle of the map, if we go down to one side, it's not going to be in the right place. If we go to the middle of the map and let go, it will kind of be in the right place. So the other panel we might want from time to time is search. And again, it's put it in a strange place, so we'll go and put search over here. Now that's caused the elevation profile to go into the wrong place. So we could pick it up again and make sure we drop it so it goes underneath here. Again, you may prefer things to be slightly different than me. So I've got search, I've got the map, I've got my elevation plan, I've got information. So information relates to anything you go and right click on over here. So I might say for the flight today, we're going to try and go to Duxford. So if I right click on Duxford and show information, it will come up over here. Now, one of the big changes for the latest build of LittleNavMap is you get many more tabs in these interfaces, and you get tabs within tabs. So within airport, I can see the runways, the communications, the procedures, the nearest airports, the weather, and so on. And I can see nav aids and airspaces and so on and so forth. Now, those tabs are controlled by these little kind of folder icons in the corner of each dialog. Each one's got them. So it shows you the tabs you can have. So obviously in this case it's showing just about everything. I could get rid of the logbook, I could get rid of the online clients and the online centers, and so you can narrow it down to just the ones you're really interested in. So we could say nav aids, airport nav aids and airspaces potentially. And again on here we might not be interested in the nearest airports, but that might be all we want. If you're not interested in having these X's everywhere, you can come into these little folders and you can say lock the tab layout and the X's vanish. So it just means you've stored, you've recovered some user interface space to use for your own purposes. You can see over here I've already done that in search. If I untick it, I get all of the tick boxes, and there's lots of other things that I could choose, but I can also lock the tab layout. I can still go and re-choose things, but I've just chosen to hide some of it. What else can we do? Okay, so we're planning our flight from Wickham Air Park over to Duxford. So the first thing we might do is right click on Wickham Air Park, and again you can see some of it isn't showing up. That's maybe because it's not certain what I've selected with the right mouse button, because there may be many things stacked on top of each other. So if I go to EGTB on the search, which will pull up Wickham Air Park on the airport search, I can right click on that one and that knows that's an airport, so it can give me the appropriate settings that should be there for an airport. So if you can't get the right option to appear within the map, you can always do a search for something and you will get the right option there. So I can set that as my departure point. Yeah, so then if I scroll down on here, you can see it's actually got the wrong place. I'm taking off from runway 24. My plane is actually sat on the apron, but I would rather it showed that I was my flight plan originates at runway 24. So I can go to the flight plan and I can select a start position for departure. Now you can only do that once you've selected the airport for your departure point. Otherwise it will be greyed out. So I'm going to say runway 24 is actually my departure point. It just moves that little circle. So it means when it starts drawing lines it will make more sense. Okay, and the circle showing around the airport is because that's what I've got selected in the search. Okay, so we'll make this a bit narrower. So you can see also I've got that showing as the departure and the destination. Just delete it for the moment as destination. It's because it was already selected in there and I made this the departure point, so it then just pushed the next one down. Okay, so if you imagine we're going to take off from EGTB, Wickham Air Park, and we're going towards Duxford, we said, didn't we? So right click on Duxford, set the airport as the destination. Now that all looks great, except in the real world there's no way we would be allowed to do this, because we would be flying through London Luton and probably part of Stansted's airspace. And to see those we can switch on these airspaces icons up here. Now I'm showing the kitchen sink just to show you what's in here. We can see all on that as well, it won't make any difference. But now generally speaking, those blue areas we need to stay out of. That's controlled airspace around the big airports, so we need to stay out of them. So to get to Duxford we're going to have to go round. Does that make sense? So we're going to start adding waypoints to our route. So when we take off out of Wickham, we might go via Bensu. So we'll right click on Bensu and add the waypoint to our map. So that gives us a climb out basically in a straight line before we start turning. And then we're going to fly up to, I mean we can look for straight lines to keep this as simple as possible. We might go for dot it. Yeah, so we're now going from Wickham. Now it's got them in the wrong order, look. So we can go and select dot it, hold control on the keyboard and press the down arrow and it will move it around. Yeah. So you can see none of it's making any sense because Bensu's in the wrong place as well. So I move Bensu down. So EGTB, Bensu, dot it, and then it's going to Duxford. But that would still mean we're crossing through this airspace. So let's go and put Olney in. So add waypoint Olney. So this time it's got it right in terms of avoiding things. So that's a bit close there. We might want to go to Bigley as well. That's a great name for a waypoint, isn't it? Add Bigley. Now looking at the wind direction, we need to be landing into the wind. So we need to come in from the northeast side of Duxford. So we might unfortunately there's no waypoints out here, but we might go to Oddvod on purpose before we make our final turn into Duxford. Now again, it's put it in the wrong place, so we can hold Control on the keyboard with it highlighted on the flight plan list over here and press the up arrow to move it up. So now we've got a pretty good flight plan. So we're going to take off from Wickham, go to Bensu, turn right, go to Dottit, then to Olney, Bigley. We could actually remove Bigley. It's not needed. So we can right click, we can either select it there or right click over on Bigley and delete the waypoint from the flight plan. Yeah, so we're just trying to keep it as simple as we can. Okay, so there's our flight plan to get to Duxford. We have to go round because we can't go through the controlled airspace, or not without getting permission. Okay, so EGTB was on the search, so we can get rid of that off the search, and obviously clearing the search shows us all the airports for the whole country, but we can actually go and get rid of the search window, to be honest. So let's go and fly our... Oh, well, let's actually, before we do that, look, I've used this recently for a much bigger flight with a big jet, and it's showing that we'll be flying at 23,000 feet. No, we won't. So let's put that in for 3,000 feet and see what it looks like. Yeah, that's going to be absolutely fine. Look, there's the plot of the land. There's a top of climb, top of descent. And it's got the waypoints marked along the elevation plan as well. So let's see how we get on then. So we know we've got it connected to the simulator already, which is great because the airplane's already there. So we're going to switch over to looking at X-Plane now. So we need to go and get the Cessna ready to go. So I'm going to turn on the master switches for the battery. I'm going to turn on the avionics. Bus 1, bus 2, so that's obviously on bus 1 and that's on bus 2. We're going to turn on the beacon. And we're going to turn on the navigation lights and the strobes. Turn on the pitot heat because it's horrible weather outside. We're going to push the mixture in so it's rich. The engine won't start unless you have a rich mixture. And the engine's running. Notice I didn't even bother looking to see if the fuel was on because the Cessna in Flight Simulator, sorry, in X-Plane, doesn't have a setting where the fuel is actually off. It's kind of gravity fed from the wings and it's always on. Which isn't, I don't think that's entirely accurate, but I guess it depends on the version of the Cessna you're flying. So our route to make our use of the simulator quite neat and tidy, we can go into LittleNavMap and we can go to the file menu. And we can export the flight plan as X-Plane FMS 11. Now these options have changed in the various betas that have come out recently. Oh, something else that's worth looking at before we do that. I'm just looking, I'm using the wrong performance file for the aircraft, so we will see this change. So if we open aircraft performance, we can point it at the Cessna 172 performance file. And suddenly these, yeah, this has changed slightly in terms of how long it's going to take. And it's complaining about invalid fuel, so I'm just going to ignore the fuel report because I know I've put plenty of fuel in the plane anyway. So, sorry, we were going to the file menu, we were going to save this to X-Plane. So we're going to export, and notice where it's going to put this file by default, and I think this might be set up in LittleNavMap, but if it's not, you just find your X-Plane folder on your system. There's an output folder inside it, and there's an FMS plans folder. So again, in the latest beta, they've started introducing hyphens in between the departure and destination airports. So EGTB to EGSU. So we'll save that. So it's saved my flight plan into the directory structure of X-Plane. So if I come back into X-Plane, and we go and look at the GPS system, we can pull up the flight plan. And we don't want the flight plan that's in here, so we will go to menu and we will use the wheel to delete flight plan and press enter. So we end up with an empty flight plan. Then we can click on the right hand side of the inner knob down here while we're looking at the flight plan page, and it pulls up a list of all the files that are in that FMS plans folder. Then we push the middle of it, which puts the focus or the cursor inside the list of flight plans, and then we can roll the wheel to go and find EGTB, EGSU. There's the one we just saved, and we can press enter on it, and that has loaded it straight into the GPS. Does that make sense? Let's have a look and see what this will do. CDI. Okay, so that's switching between using the GPS settings for the radios and the navigation settings for the radios. So we'll leave it on nav. What does OBS do? Interesting, Omni bearing selector. Right, I'm going to leave that off. Message, it's saying there's a message, nav data out of date. That's just warning me that my Navigraph data is out of date. Navigraph is a way of having the most up-to-date data for the frequencies and nav aids and things like that in the simulator. So we're not going to worry too much about that. Okay, so we're pretty much ready to go. So I'm going to grab the joystick and slide it across the desk. And I've got a few keys mapped for views around the aircraft on my keypad in X-Plane, so I get kind of, you know, quite quick access to go and see different views of the airplane. You can see smoke pouring out the engine at the moment. It's a cold day. Release the parking brakes. I've just done that with a mapped button on my controller, but it's actually down here. So that is engaging the parking brakes, and then when it's folded up, they are not engaged, so the airplane can roll. So let's start rolling. So we're rolling out down the taxiway. We're not going to bother with air traffic control because the air traffic control that's built into X-Plane is pretty awful. So in the real world, you would come along here and you would stop short at the line here, and then you would ask for permission to take off from the tower, but we haven't got anybody in the tower today, so we're just going to roll straight onto the runway. Okay. So let's get the airplane straight. Flaps 1. Full throttle. And we're up. There's quite a strong crosswind, so I'm going to use the elevator trim straight away so we don't climb too strongly. So I'm just watching the indicated airspeed as well, so we're flying in the same heading almost that we took off. Now look at this, the compass is massively out from the magnetic compass up here. We should be flying 230 degrees. And it's showing something completely different, so I'm going to adjust it. I should have done that before I took off, really. So I'm going to make this match 225, or sorry, 220. We're doing 210 degrees now. So I'm going to make this, let's just straighten the plane up. So we're doing 210. Trying to make the compass stick at 210 so we get time to adjust this. Okay, so I really should have checked that before I took off to make sure it matched the one on the windscreen. So we are going to, let's have a look over here. We're flying towards Bensu. So at this point we can go and set the autopilot. I'm just trimming the plane out, cut the engine back. We don't really want to go more than fuel flow of 10, will be fine. So what flight height are we at? We're coming up to 2,500 feet, so when we get to 2,500 feet I'll engage altitude hold. That'll do. He says, famous last words, the autopilot is not coming on. Interesting. Okay, let's get the heading going the same way we are. Will it engage heading mode? Yes, it has. Will it now engage altitude hold? Yes, it will. That's strange, I've never noticed that before. You appear to have to engage heading mode before altitude mode. Anyway. Worth knowing, I guess. So we can now use the heading bug to steer. So we're going to turn back towards Bensu. Now if you remember from previously, we can almost go nav mode because we've got a flight plan. And we have to press it twice, remember, to get GPS to light up. So now the aeroplane is going to follow the plan. So it's flying towards Bensu and then it will make the right turn. Now if we did want to climb to 3,000 feet, we can do it. We can go to vertical speed mode and we can go and just ascend at say 500 feet a minute. So you can see the vertical speed has come up to 500 feet. So all I did was click vertical speed and then rolled the wheel. So the plane is navigating now on its own, it's steering to follow the plan, as it's in nav mode. Where nav mode is so valuable is the plane will automatically track against the wind, so if you're flying in a crosswind, because it's following the GPS signal and not just the compass direction, it will account for the wind, you know, so it'll fly into or out of the wind to carry on flying along the track that you want it to across the ground. So yeah, this is showing north, so this is very strange. So maybe this is showing true north instead of magnetic. So while we're flying along, so you can see we're flying along the track here towards Dottit. We could check our position if we wanted to by looking at navigation radio stations. So I'm going to turn off the sectors and we can see there's one over here, BNN 113.75. So let's try tuning that in. What was it? 113.75. So if we go into, zoom in to see us do this. So we can press the middle of this button to switch from COM to VLOC, and now we can tune the navigation radios. So 113.75, and we can switch between the active and the standby. So we've now made this active. So if you remember, we've got the from and to at the bottom showing there. So as we scroll this through, when the needle is in the middle, it means we are at 250 degrees from the beacon. So if we go and look over here, whoa, what's happened here? So let's have a look outside. Why are we spinning? The autopilot is disengaged. I have no idea why that happened. So I'm just trimming us out. This is why you need to keep an eye on your aeroplane. This is why you can't rely totally on an autopilot. So I'm busy, there we go, so the plane is back flying level. We're at 4,000 feet though. So heading mode. Again, fighting this to get it to go back in the direction we want it to go. Altitude hold mode. So I'm not going to use nav mode because it just kicked off on us, didn't it? It's slightly scary. Okay, we're back on track. So we're flying towards Dot It. And I've completely forgotten what I was talking about. Oh yeah, we were going to check our direction. So, from 113.75, we are apparently 240, 250, 260 degrees from it. So if we zoom in and go right click on it and measure distance and say 260 degrees, that is matching where we were. Does that make sense? So the direction from the beacon is 260 degrees. Now if we go back into the aircraft and we spin this all the way around, the nav marker at the bottom will change to 2. There it goes. And when we get all the way back round, we can say now at about 60, 70, 85 degrees to the beacon from us. So we measure distance from us to the beacon, and it's 85 degrees, which is exactly what we said. Does that make sense? So again, it's just a backup against the GPS. To be honest, if you've got GPS, you don't really need to use the nav radios in the same way anymore. Their main use becomes for ILS. Obviously, if the GPS fails, then you suddenly need them. I have no idea what the stats are on how reliable the nav radios are versus the GPS, but I guess if you think about it, the tuning for the nav radios is in the screen, so even if the screen failed, you've lost your nav radios anyway. At that point, I guess you would use your magnetic compass and start talking to the ground, but again, tuning for the comm radios is on the screen. I guess, can you use this as a backup? I'm just wondering if there's backup controls somewhere. Because you would think if this component fails, or the screen failed for whatever reason, you've lost all of your comm radios and your nav radios. I guess the idea is you wouldn't be so remote from anywhere that you wouldn't have a clue where you last were. So you could probably retrace your steps knowing, you know, you'd know your flight plan. You wouldn't be flying a flight plan clueless. So just for a bit of fun, rather than following this all the way around, which we could do over to Duxford, let's change plans now and fly over to Oxford Kidlington. So we're going to do this by flying a bearing. So from where we are, we need to go add position to flight plan. Also, no we don't. We need to right click on our aeroplane, measure distance just to get an angle. So we'd like to fly about 305 degrees from where we are at the moment. So let's go and move our heading bug then to 305 degrees. So our plane is now changing over to 305 degrees. We'll also, while we're at it, go in vertical speed, and we'll go down and cut the throttle while we do it. And come down to about 2,500 feet. We're very high. So I'll leave it descending for a while. So again, we could do this without looking at LittleNavMap, but it makes no sense to not take advantage of it. So let's go and see, that's where we were. Measure distance, so 305. So we can see where we are, and this will give us some idea actually of how badly out that compass is. It's making no sense to me, because that's showing 310. That's showing 305. It's absolutely bizarre, and that's showing 327. I'm wondering what's going on. I wonder if there are any options to reset the failures, maybe. Edit failures. Fix all systems. Done. Apply. How strange. So we are not flying a track of 305 degrees at all. Means this is massively out. So if we ignore this one and match this to the GPS, which is probably accurate, we might have a bit of a happier time. I'll have to do a bit of reading on that. That's very, very strange. Why would that... So I don't think you can adjust this compass either. So why would it be so massively out? So we adjusted this one to match that one, but it was obviously this that was most accurate. The GPS was accurate. The magnetic compass wasn't, and this was massively out when we got in the aircraft. Anyway. Just shows sometimes you have to do some fault finding and just think logically through what you can trust, and I'm going to trust GPS in this case. So height is slowly coming down. We're coming down to 2,000 feet. I will press altitude hold when we get to 2,000 feet. I think the ground level is about 300 feet around here, so maybe 400. Okay, so we've hit altitude hold, so the aircraft is now trimming itself to come slightly back up to meet 2,000 feet. Again, if we zoom in, we can see the setting that has been set for the barometric pressure. So using this wheel would change that, and that will move the needles. So we could, for example, go to Oxford, show information for Oxford. We can see 1000 is the pressure, 29.53. So this should say 1000, not 1015. Again, it's something I should have done before I took off. So we weren't at 2,000 feet, we were at more like 1600, 1700 feet. So let's account for that as well. Vertical speed. We're going to climb back up at 500 feet a minute. So we're going to open the engines back up a bit. Coming back up to 2,000 feet, slowly, go for full throttle. Altitude, buttons pressed. So there's quite a few things I should have really done via a checklist on the ground. And I didn't, and you can see the repercussions of not having done a checklist now. But I'm having to solve things in the air that I should never have had to deal with, like getting the compass to match up and getting the barometric pressure correct. You could see it was several hundred feet out. So if I was in thick cloud, I wouldn't have been able to trust the altimeter at all. So it suddenly shows how critical some of these instruments can be and how you can make mistakes and get yourself killed, basically. So we are going to take another 30 degrees off our direction, so we go and move the heading bug to west, and we'll go and tune in Nav1 to the ILS frequency to 108.35. So remember, we need to push this to switch over to the radios. 108.35. So the outer ring is the whole numbers. The inner ring is the decimals. 108.35. Then we switch that over to become the active frequency. So we can see it's switched off at the moment because it's not close enough, or not within the range of that frequency being broadcast for us to even see it. As we get closer, it will suddenly switch on. So we're flying along 2,000 feet. See outside. It would be quite interesting to go and put on thick fog, wouldn't it? But we'll just leave it as it is. It's worth pointing out while we're in the air, we really should have leaned the engine out. Did you hear the revs raised there? Well, I leaned it a little bit. If I put it in rich, there's a slight dip in revs. So the engine on full rich isn't always accurate, so the higher you go, the more you're going to have to lean the engine out. Some engines react more to that than others. So if you're kind of, 6,000-7,000 feet and you're thinking this Cessna isn't making any power, it's because you're still running on rich and you haven't leaned the engine out. So the fuel air mixture is wrong. Okay, so we can see on the map coming across. So if we're going to intercept somewhere over here, that'll be about right for 2,000 feet. We might be a little bit above the glide slope, but that's fine. But we'll have several miles to correct it. You really don't need that much room in a Cessna to prepare for landing. Hopefully this will start to change. On a normal radio frequency, you would change the omni-bearing selector to match the direction of the runway, and you could still do that, which would help you just for orienting and reminding yourself. So 191 magnetic. So we'll do that both here. So again we can hold this on, I think. 60, 70, 80, 90. So we know 191 is the direction of the runway. And we could do the same trick here with the heading bug. So we know it's 191. And notice now it's following the bug. So I'm going to turn the autopilot off. We don't want to do that. I want to move the bug, and the autopilot started following it. So I'm going to fly back to west. Now, did you notice a moment ago the ILS radio suddenly picked up the frequency? So I'm just trimming the aeroplane out. I'm flying it by hand now. We'll probably fly it by hand all the way in, to be honest now. But all we're watching for now is for the needles to come in. We're at the right height already. So we're waiting for the vertical needle illustrates your horizontal placement in relation to the beam down to the runway. The horizontal needle is your vertical placement. So when the vertical needle is off to one side, it means we are to the left of the beam. When it's showing we are above the horizontal needle, it means we are above the beam. If we look over here, we are to the left. In relation to us, looking this way, we are to the left of the beam. We're slowly turning. I'm going to turn us back to 270. It's like a box of frogs, isn't it, controlling an aeroplane? So yeah, we are to the left of the beam in relation to the runway. So that needle will start to fall back into the centre as we get closer to it. We're considerably above where we should be at this distance. So I'm going to cut the engine back and drop. And we'll see the horizontal needle on nav 1 raised back towards the middle. And here it comes. So at this distance from the airport, it's basically telling us we should be at about, was it 1800 feet now? 1750? Yeah, about 1750 for this distance from the airport. Is telling us. Yeah, so now I've leveled out, so vertical speed is back towards 0, and that horizontal needle is not moving around, look, because we're not going up or down anymore, and because, looking on the map, we're not varying our distance from the airport very much. It's the same height, you know, from where we were a few seconds ago to here, because we've not gone further away or closer. So that the vertical needle should start moving anytime soon, and we start our left turn. So we just carry on flying level, following that the horizontal needle, which is our vertical position in relation to the beam. Here comes the vertical needle. So we're closer and closer to the centre line. So if I start turning, don't have to turn very fast. Again, I have to remind myself I'm actually going back past the runway direction, so I'm going further away from the needle. So you have to look at the compass at the same time and to know when you are either beyond the direction, so we know, looking at the marker on the compass, that's the direction the runway is. So I need to keep going across the runway direction until the needle comes into nearly the middle, and then I can turn back towards it. Does that make sense? So if you time it correctly, you get back to it at the same time. And again, that compass is wildly out. So we're looking at 190 degrees we're actually flying along at, so we need to make sure this is right, because it's causing us to make massive mistakes. Okay, so you can see the runway out in front of us now, but let's follow the needles. Now I've corrected the compass. So again, this is another lesson that because the needles weren't right, I was actually not in the right place in the sky. But now they are, I can use them. So I can use the marker on the compass accurately. So I'm just following nav 1. flaps down. Now the indicated airspeed is in the white area. It's safe to drop the flaps. So slightly off to the left, you can see on nav 1. So I'm just turning ever so slightly right and following the needles down. Getting a bit slow, getting near to stall speed. So I guess the main point of this flight, beyond just the procedural stuff, is I didn't do a checklist at the start. I didn't get the compasses aligned properly. I didn't get the barometric pressure on the altitude set correctly. And it's caused mayhem during the flight. The strange thing for me, and I'm not sure if this is an issue with the simulator, is the magnetic compass above the instrument panel was massively out when we took off, and it still is, but it's coming back towards being correct. So whether, I'm not sure if X-Plane simulates magnetic anomalies. Let's go back onto the ILS beam. I'm not really following things very accurately today. Let's follow it in. It's quite a strong crosswind, you can see it. Look, I'm having to crab across it. So let's get this back onto the centre line. To be honest, once you get close to the runway, you stop looking at ILS. And you just fly the aircraft. There's a huge debate about how smoothly you should try and land an aeroplane, or whether you should plant the wheels into the tarmac. Certainly with the big jets, you should not try and get a minimum descent rate above the tarmac. You should plant them into the ground. You can actually damage the undercarriage by causing a shimmy, essentially, where the tyres don't grip the tarmac straight away, and it causes an oscillation through the landing gear and damages it. So you need to plant the landing gear in most cases. Anyway, I'm going to stop the video there. I'm not going to bother with the whole taxiing back. So there you go. A huge lesson about doing checklists and actually checking the instruments before you take off, because I didn't, and I paid for it. So there you go. So there was some flight planning, and some flying, and some navigating, and some dealing with issues along the way.